Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming at you live from episode 19 of Life on the Rocks with your host, Connor Rocques. Today's featured guest in the hot seat is Sudburys' own Tom Price. How are you, my friend?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
It's an honest pleasure to have Tom on the show. For anyone who doesn't know Tom, or if you haven't seen him around the city, this guy has a resume on him, let me tell you, okay? He has 50 years in the engineering business related to heavy construction and industry, also 35 years with Inco in detailed design, project management, and conceptual engineering. He is also a member of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and he's also part of the Canadian Institute of Mining. There's also about 50 other things I can also name, but that gives you the gist of where Tom's coming from. Very diverse, very versatile background. Tom, I want you to start this off. What got you started within the engineering business, or just in general? I want you to tell the audience your story.
Yeah, sure. As I indicated when I sent you my note, one of the most important facets of my background is that I was raised on a farm.
Definitely.
And farmers are natural engineers. An engineer's responsibilities and duties and function in life is to manage energy.
Okay.
And farmers have to do that daily. You do it daily as well. So we all do it daily. For example, when you come into the room and you turn on the light switch, you managed energy. You allowed it to flow to the light. When you turn down the camera, you managed energy. So farmers do this every day, and they have to know how to do that and keep their operation running. So they're natural engineers. By the time I started high school, I could do welding, I could do electrical work, carpentry work, any kind of mechanical work. You have to learn that.
Definitely.
So that's what got me started, and it was fun. So I went into it on the basis of, first of all, starting with detailed design and progressed over the years. And I can say I was very fortunate. I've had many, many excellent mentors over the years. So
you said you had over 50 of the top, top leaders in terms of the mining, or not mining industry, but in terms of the engineering field, right?
Yes.
And some are still around, some have passed.
Absolutely.
I want you to talk to me about how those figures played such a prominent aspect in your life, because I mean, I'm one of those guys that say, mentors are everything. They kind of direct where you're going to go. It's the people you associate with. Can you talk me through that?
Oh, absolutely. The mentorship cannot be overvalued. The people that I was fortunate enough to work with were all experts in their field. They were all very accomplished in their fields. But that accomplishment gave them a level of confidence that allowed them to share what they knew. And they were very proud to share what they knew. So they didn't mind teaching me everything that they knew. Now, I didn't learn everything that they knew, but they tried.
You were there. You still tried. Yeah, you were there. Yeah.
So the mentorship is far better, in my opinion, than even schooling. Because schooling, you're taught theory, you're taught given information, but in mentorship, you're getting knowledge.
Definitely.
These are people who've done it. They've been there, they've done it, they have the experience to know what works and what doesn't. So I was very fortunate to work with those type of people. Even more fortunate that they were willing to work with me and teach me what they thought I needed to know. And it was just a tremendous career.
Career experience, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you would obviously argue that, or agree that that's what took you maybe to the next level, was having some of these figures in your life, because they gave you, I guess you could say, the insider look, or the quote I like to use is, it's all about standing on the shoulders of other giants, right?
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
able to propel you kind of to where you get to in I guess, today's age, like you see what you've done. I want to walk you through, obviously you're an engineer, and there's always a connotation with engineers, I always thought very logical thinkers. So I was telling Tom earlier this, one of my books obviously was Mindset is Everything. And what I wanted to ask you, I want you to walk me through the engineer mindset. So you were basing it in, you were saying it's all about energy. You know what I mean? You were a farmer, and then this is where it kind of progressed into today. But talk me through the engineer mindset, how you guys think, as a whole. I know it's different from obviously a legal mind where you're going to try to put someone into the corner, leverage their thoughts, in a sense. I want you to walk me through that.
Well,
I know it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is, and it's a very, very large question. The energy minds, or the engineering mindset that you see typically, is a very closed world. All of us, without exception, we do engineering every day. We manage our life, we manage the energy flow of our life. For example, if on your way in here today, you may have been coming down one street and saw that there was a traffic jam ahead. In managing your life and managing the energy flow, you took a detour and went another way. That's managing your energy.
Exactly.
Now, that's in the everyday life. The engineer's role is really to say, okay, we're going to manage that energy. What materials are suitable? And what are the limitations of that material?
Okay.
Okay. Now, for example, if you turn on the light, you know that the electricity is flowing through a copper wire. You're not going to use a wooden 2x4.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know the material for electrical flow. But you're not going to flow water through that copper wire. You're going to put in a pipe.
Exactly, yeah.
So the materials are key to what you're doing.
Okay.
And the engineering mind says, okay, what works? What can I make work? What have I got available that I can make do this job? And the innovative engineering, and by the way, that's where the word engineer comes from, is innovation,
Okay.
because it's ingenuity.
Okay, yeah.
That's where the engineering word comes from. So the engineer will take the situation and he'll find the most innovative way to do whatever task needs to be done to make the energy flow where it needs to flow.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
So that's really the mindset. It's a system of logic and understanding the materials you're working with.
Exactly. So different variables that are going to lead to your success. So for me, I'm more of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know, we've got an engineer. I'm not sure. I like that saying, but yeah. So it's one of those type of things. So well, how am I going to get to X, Y, and Z? If we want to create something, we're all kind of creators, I guess you could say, right? So I want to ask you this then. So going off of the entrepreneur mindset, I'm always at the basis, like I said, Tom, is that it's great to have very intellectual people around you and associate yourself with different people, but how do you feel about this assertion? I would always tell people, I said, it's not so much about being smart, it's about being strategic. And that's what I look at an engineer as. Someone that, like you said, you can find the different variables an easier way to kind of make something easier or produce that. How do you feel about that assertion? It's not about being smart, it's about being strategic.
Well, I would suggest that you left out a key word, and that's intelligent. Okay? Many people make the mistake that they believe intelligence is being smart, and it's not.
Okay.
Intelligence is having the ability to learn and taking that learning and having information at your fingertips. Being smart is how you use that. Okay?
I like that.
Now, if you're smart and you use your intelligence and look at the strategic positioning you're in, then you've got the combination you're talking about. But too many people confuse intelligence with smart.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, having strategic points in your life or having strategic issues that you deal with, yes, definitely. You have to have stepping off points. For example, as I mentioned earlier, driving down the street. One of the strategic points is that next intersection.
Exactly, yeah.
And if you can't get to it, you can't detour.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, strategy and strategic points are critical.
That's the reason I want to ask you too. Like I said, I've never had an engineer on this show, and it was super important to me because I'm trying to look at different minds. People that are peak performers. You're going from your executive types to your top level engineers, accountants, anything else everyone else within their different fields. So I thought it was super important because I see a lot of people. I see a similar pattern of thinking. You look at the people that are really peak performers. There was 3 variables that I've found so far when I've studied it. So the person was clear. They were extremely clear on their target, what they're trying to hit. With that clarity, they knew what they wanted, so that they kind of go hand in hand. And then the most important thing, obviously, with anybody is how you execute. And that's the same thing, like you would say as an engineer, is where you're going to go with that certain path. It's like, this is what I'm trying to build. This is how I'm going to execute. And that's where you find a lot of failure, I believe, in life, is that people have all these variables, like you would say. They have the intellect, they're smart, but they're not smart, but they're not able to execute accordingly, and then that's where you find failure.
Yes.
You said yourself, so you've dealt with a number of executives in the past as well?
Oh, yes.
And you said there were different characters. Like, can you talk to me? You seem like the type of person I was going to say that, you've dealt with so many different minds, so many different kind of facets. I was asking Mike Vagnini the same question, like when you get so many different types, so if you have an executive type to then a different engineering type, like how do you deal with different people? What are some tricks or things you would do? If you get someone that's really bullheaded, but then you have someone that's more laid back, you can't deal with everybody the same, right? Not one shoe fits all.
Well,
That's it.
I hate to destroy your myth, but yes, you can. And the one shoe is that you work with people.
Okay.
You always work with people. It doesn't matter what their character, it doesn't matter what their personality, you have to work with them.
Definitely.
Okay? So that's the one common denominator in all the people you ever have to deal with. You have to recognize that, hey, that's who you have to deal with.
Definitely, yeah.
A good manager doesn't go out and hire all top-notch people in one respect. He hires a bunch of people, he tries to get those who are strong in the fields that he needs, but he then takes a look at them and he says, okay, now I've got to work with these people. What's his strengths? What's his weaknesses? What's his strength? And you work with those strengths. You don't work with their weakness.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay? You put their weaknesses aside and you work on their strength. And it's amazing, because when you appeal to everybody's strength, they will all come forward and they will contribute heavily. If you work on their weaknesses, they know they're weak. They'll be very reluctant.
So true, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the common denominator is determine what the strength of the individuals are and work with that.
I really like that actually, Tom, because I always tell people, and primarily if I'm dealing with millennials and students, I find a lot of time our society as a whole is trying to say, they're saying, well, you're weak at this, focus on what you're weak at. But I tell everyone to go all in on your strengths. You know what, if you're not really good, let's say at math, obviously you're going to work on that along the side, but focus on what you're really good at and something that kind of brings you that pleasure that's going to help you get that momentum forward, opposed to saying, well, I'm no good at this. So then it kind of sucks the life out of you, or the energy rather.
Yes.
And so you focus on the things. And another point with that is dealing with students, I think you can agree with this. I tell people, it comes from Tony Robbins, passion equals energy in a sense. Like for myself, I'm a very high energy person. And I try to come in rooms sometimes and keep myself, tone it down, but I can't help it. I got a lot of passion and a lot of energy for things. So this leads into this question I want to ask. So Tom, obviously you guys could see out there, is a great leader. You're somebody, you have the 50 mentors in the world. You've done so many different things. What does it take to become a great leader? And by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, he also is an advisor for Mike Vagnini, who's doing a great job out there. What does it take to be a great leader, Tom?
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself a great leader.
I do. I consider it. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
But I guess if I had to define a great leader, it would be the individual who does. Not the one who tells you to do, but the one who does and sets by example what they want to have done. And by doing so, automatically other people will follow in.
Definitely.
And I don't have to, well, I'll give you an example. Working at Inco during shutdowns, we had a bunch of contractors in. The yard was a mess. I went out. I didn't say anything to anybody. I simply walked around, picked up the garbage, and put it in the garbage cans. 2 days I did that. I didn't need to do it the rest of the shutdown.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody else was walking. They were picking up the garbage. They weren't throwing it on the ground. They were putting it where it should be. That's leading.
That's leading right there.
If I acted like what we interpret as a typical boss, I could have gone out and lectured them to keep the site clean and all that. It didn't work. A few hours later, it would have been back to the same mess. But when I'm out there doing it, they see that, they do it.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's leading.
That's leading. I really like that, and that's I call it the trench mentality. You got to get in the trench with your troops, sort of.
Absolutely. And
you show them, and then people see that, and it's not just you're barking in their ear. I think there's a major problem in society today is that there's so much noise. We're constantly with the online sphere, everybody's barking in everyone's ear, and we don't have enough people going out there just doing it. And a lot of people, you're going to get hit with a lot of criticism in a number of different realms. Well, maybe this person's doing that, or this person's doing this. But I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you're happy and you're aiming towards something, you have your target, you're showing people, I think that's what makes a great leader, like you said.
Well, if I may interject,
most definitely.
And part of the problem is we have too many people coming out and going into a job where they are a boss, not a leader.
Exactly, yeah.
They don't know what is required in that job, but they're prepared to tell people what to do.
Definitely, yeah.
That doesn't work. One of the best leaders that I do consider him a real leader, and most people in Sudbury know of Gord Slade. He used to be vice president or president of Falconbridge for many years. And Gord was the ideal leader and still is, mainly because everybody that worked for him knew and respected that he knew their jobs as well as they did. And they could respect him because he respected them.
Definitely.
Terrific leader.
Exactly, right there, yeah.
And he still is, and he's 80-some years old. So
it goes to show you, you led by example, and then still to this day, obviously, you're still talking about it, which is great.
Yes.
I have an example for you, actually. I speak about it sometimes. I had a publicist, so obviously their job was to get you publicity for certain aspects of things. For me, it was a book campaign I did. I was trying to get publicity for my second book to build some momentum and get the word out kind of deal. And what the gentleman's name was RJ Garris, and he had told me, he said, Connor, and this example has been used, but I thought it was very important. He said, you're not going to go to a financial advisor, a lot of the time if they're making less than you. And he tried to use the money example, but then he said the same thing in relation to a publicist. He said, Connor, you're not going to go to a guy that's been in the game or the industry for a year and expect him to be able to give you the results you want. And in his case, he had over 25, 30 years in that industry, had the connection base. But the kind of funny double-edged sword aspect of this is the campaign failed. That was on my fault, not his. I wasn't able to pitch nationally, so I failed to Fox News, Success Magazine, all these big hitters. But it was still interesting, that observation that, it's one of those things that you got to look at these guys that have been in there. You're not going to listen to somebody that, they make the joke that they have a lot of these 25-year-old life coaches out there. And, they haven't truly lived, unless they have that. But then a lot of us, we buy into those type of people, right?
Yeah, and I used to get young engineers straight out of university coming to work for me when I worked at Inco, and one of the things that I always told them is, okay, you've got your degree, you've gone to university, you've been given a lot of information, okay, but it's just information. Now you're going to get your education.
Oh, there we go, I like that.
Okay, I can tell you that it's minus 30 degrees outside, that's information. When you walk outside, it's education. That's knowledge, okay? You've now had an education and you've gained the knowledge of what is out there. You can't have that knowledge until you've got some experience to teach you that the information is applicable. Then it becomes knowledge. And that's what you run into, and that's what he was trying to tell you, that he has the knowledge because he knows what works.
Definitely, yeah.
He's been through the hard knocks and he can guide you. The individual who's just come out of university hasn't had those hard knocks yet.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. You need that period of mentorship to get the education and to gain the knowledge. And
to be able to succeed, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I want to ask you about that then, about this future generation. I mean, would you argue that that's one of the biggest problems that we have? I don't want to, knock my generation, but I find there's a number of issues, and I tell people, and this is as a joke, I'm allergic to excuses and laziness. And my mentality is, coming from an entrepreneurial background, I tell people, if you can't find a job, there's two options. You either create a job, find a way that you can, start making money, create your own job, or the second aspect is, if you can't find one, go start working charity events. Yeah. Start working for free. You're not getting paid anyways. You're not going to get paid for those excuses, right? And that was the joke. And but it's one of those things, I think, would you argue that probably is one of the problems with our generation, is that they're not, they have all this information, but they're not applying it. They're not executing. They're following a similar pattern or formula, and it's not leading to the same thing. I'm not knocking anyone that gets a degree. I think it's a great aspect when you're clear. Yep. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of students right now currently are going to university. They're going to get their education. It's great. They're going to invest the money into capital, and they're going to go meet these great mentors and teachers. But what's happening is they're not focused. They're like, well, I have to go be a doctor because it's the only way. That's how I'm going to get a job. They're going into it kind of backwards. Would you argue that's probably one of the biggest problems right now, is that lack of clarity? That's what I see in society.
I don't know if there's so much clarity as lack of commitment and will. They're going into something that they're not committed to.
It's true.
And they don't have the will to succeed at.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. Clarity, to a degree, but again, I think the bigger factor is the lack of commitment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna become a doctor because I like the wages a doctor gets, and that's not a commitment.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. I use the example at one point in my life. Some teachers asked me how we get around the problem with sorting out a good teacher from a bad teacher until they get tenure. I said, it's easy. It's very easy. And the individual said, well, how do you do it? I said, well, I can test you right now. Okay. I said, what's your favorite thing in life? Oh, golf. I said, tell me about it. He said, what would you like to know? I said, well, you're not a very good teacher. If you were committed and passionate about golf, you wouldn't have waited for me to ask about it.
Absolutely.
You would have started telling me how great golf is, how it affects your exercise, how it affects your aim. You would have been eager to tell me.
Exactly, yeah.
He wasn't.
Right there. I like that.
So,
I think it's funny actually that you mentioned that too, and it's the same thing. I go off the similar concept when I'm talking to different people, and I try to, one of my things, I call myself a people person. Mm-hmm. I like to hear people's stories, and that's why this show primarily kind of flourished from this.
Right.
But what I find, let's say so a couple times I've had to do some hiring processes. You're bringing people in to hire them or stuff like that, and you can always see the certain ones. And as a speaker, I see that too. You're looking through the audience. You look at someone when you shake their hand, you see the fire in their eyes.
Yeah.
And those are the ones I look for. It's not so much the person that, let's say they got 20 different credentials. I'm looking for the person that's going to get the job done. Mm-hmm. And the person that's willing to work, you can see that fire, they shake their hand. I've had a number of people before, they'll reach out once and they'll say, I want to work with you, I want to do something, and that's it. And I'm not going to go chasing them unless I need, I want to hire them. But I've also had people that have just rode me, like, they're sitting there like, Connor, I want to get in on this. I really want to get in. And all of a sudden, they keep seeing texts come up, and those are the people I look for, and those are the drivers, the hunger. It's an intangible.
That's right.
That you got to look for, and those are the drivers.
Well, they've made the commitment in their life to go that route.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the will to do so is there. So yeah, you're working with an easy individual.
Yeah, exactly. So the self-drivers, and would you argue that that's a lack in our society? So we're like the commitment part, but that people aren't, I find, we have so much information that we're not so much self-driven. There's too many options, too many things. People are like, well, I can't do this.
Yeah, and that's partially, well, not partially, it's almost entirely due to the fact that we have placed so heavy of an emphasis on accreditations and schooling achievements that we neglect the individual.
Definitely.
Many places today you go in and people go in and apply for a job, they have to fill out a computer application. The computer application cannot tell your character.
Exactly, yeah, no personality, right?
Absolutely none. Yeah. So if the computer is hiring you, you're in the wrong place.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And that's a bigger problem than any of the other stuff, because when you have a society that's built on accreditations, and again, I've used this in my career as well. I've had an individual who was a PhD. After 30 years, he told me that I was wrong because he was a PhD and he knew better. And my response to him was, well, okay, you're a PhD. That was 30 years ago. You got your PhD. What have you done with it since?
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you haven't done anything with it since, then don't tell me that you've got it.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
What have you done? Now let's go from there.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's true of all of us. Yes, like I've never used my educational accreditations to get a job.
Exactly, yeah.
Never in my career. And the reason for that, the first job I had, the chief engineer called me in before I started and he said, look, everybody here knows what you did in school. We know what you're capable of. That's not what's going to make you successful here. He says, what you do for us is what's going to make you successful. Never forgot it.
Never again, no, for sure. No, I think that's so important, and that is one of the things that, we're in like you said, it's a degree-based society, and I wrote an article a little while back, and I did it to break through the noise of the mind. It was, the comment, it wasn't meant to be arrogant, but I wanted people to read it, so I termed it, I said, get an MBA, ? I don't need the year vacation, which it was a joke. Like I just wanted to kind of lure them in with that. It wasn't, the article wasn't written like that. But it was one of those things that I think, like you said, it's just based off of different resumes. And what happens, let's say, so I tell students primarily when I'm dealing with them, I say, well, okay, yeah, you got your degree, and let's say you go to law school. We both have the same marks. What else did you do extra? Because what's going to happen if, like you said, the computer or it's going through a filing process, they look, oh, there's Johnny and there's Kayla. They have the exact same resume. Okay, same degree, same credentials. It's that extra factor that'll sell you, and as I say, the distinguishing factor sells. And I use selling in the term that it's going to help you, right? It's not like I'm trying to take money or sell. It's just your ability to be able to persuade and be able to move forward kind of deal.
Right.
And that's the problem. I think too many people are the same. None of us want to kind of step outside of that boundary and be ourselves. And that's the most important thing.
Oh, absolutely. Let
their personality shine. You shake someone's hand, you bust a joke, and they'll remember that opposed to just kind of, being just a normal person, right?
Oh, yeah. No, if you've got to put on a show, you're in the wrong job.
Yeah, no, definitely. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I want, so backing this up for a second to interject, so I want you to walk me through, you've had, like you said, 50 years in the engineering business, you did over 35 years at Inco. Talk to me about that. Like, working with Inco, I mean, that's a complete, it's a very big company.
Yes. Fortunately, I was in the engineering department, and my attitude when I joined the company was that I would take on anything that no one else wanted.
I like that. That's awesome. Yeah.
And any project that somebody else was turning down or was resisting, hey, give it to me, I'll do it. Those projects are the ones where you learn the most.
Definitely.
Okay? Being willing to take on those challenges and master them is the biggest learning curve in the world. Okay? It far exceeds anything you'll get in school. It far exceeds anything that you'll get anywhere else. Because having to fight your way through all of the problems to reach the solution means that you've got to go back to the very basics and solve it from the very basic issues. And that's one thing that we do not do anymore. Ex-President or former President Barack Obama made a very profound statement in Montreal the other night. He said that we live in a world today where we tend to believe, how did he put it? We tend to believe information that agrees with our opinion rather than believing facts to form our opinion. And that's very profound because that's what we do. We see it every day. People are given information, they believe it, they run with it. Instead of going back and finding out the facts, then basing their opinion, it's very easy. If you give me information that agrees with what I think,
Exactly. Yeah.
hey, great, you're a nice guy.
Exactly. Yeah. I like this guy already. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they call it in psychology. I don't remember the term. Don't quote me on this, but it's either confirmation bias. I think that's what the
Yes.
term did. I remember studying about it or something like that at the time. But that's just information, right? I could be wrong,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's exactly one of the major issues. People are just posting articles and then it looks like it's from a scholarly source. I had a lot of issues with that in university because you'd be searching for information and you're always looking for, like Bill Gates says, you get the guys that are looking for the shortcuts.
Yep.
And I was one of those guys in university trying to find, I'm like, okay, how can I get this done the fastest, write this in there, add my own kind of stuff with it. And that's where I ran into issues because you have teachers come back and say, oh, well, this isn't scholarly. It's like, well, I found this on 5 different sites. It's the same, so you figure it'd be scholarly information. But I think that is what's happening right now is that, I think the only way to get to people nowadays is you have to break through the noise of their mind. And you have different speakers. So Tony Robbins, and I'm not an advocate, I'm a big advocate for him, but, obviously I don't want to be swearing on stage, but he'll swear on stage. And you never know because the guy deals with some of the top, influencers, but he sits there to get through the noise of your mind. And that's what's happening with people nowadays, I think, my belief. I could be wrong. It's biased.
To a large degree, yes.
People just don't want to vote anymore. They'd rather vote for something on TV than go out and vote, right, a lot of time? That's bias on my end.
Well, voting is a whole different...
That's another loaded...
It's a whole different world.
We won't go there, unless you want it, but...
yeah.
But with a lot of things, you can't convince people to do anything anymore, because we become desensitized, it seems, as a society, I always ask the question, Tom, and this is where I want to bring the interview. Why can't I right now, just go take some money and go buy a ton of water and ship it out to a country like Africa? Like, why aren't more people doing it? We are. There is a lot, but you're not hearing about that. You're hearing about what sells, the drama, the crap that's on television, right? But we need more people that are coming together. So what I'm leading to right here is that, you're an advisor for Mike Vagnini. You've been around the community. You've been around the world. Like, Mike is world-renowned. Or not Mike, Tom is world-renowned here. How do you feel about the importance of giving back and helping people? It's because we're very individualistic in the society, but I think we need to be more out there to help and give.
You're absolutely right. The problem is, in giving back, many people think that giving back is providing solutions. And the most difficult part of giving back or to even doing anything is defining the problem. And most people don't bother to define the problem or the objective before they offer the solution. You want to ship water. Well, is water really the problem?
No.
Do you know that? And if you don't know that, then you're making the problem worse. Okay? So defining what the objectives or what the problem is the most difficult task that we face. I have a system, and Michael probably resents me a little bit on this, but I have a system that I've used for over 50 years. I have a little circle at the bottom, a large circle at the top, and a medium-sized circle in the middle. The bottom circle is the objectives.
Okay.
That's my goals. I have to define those clearly. And and I can demonstrate it in a minute for you. Once I define those goals, then I have to look at the big circle, which is the input variables. What variables are there that can either facilitate me meeting those goals or prevent me from meeting them? Once I know those variables, I can then do the third circle in the middle, which is the controls.
Okay.
I can design systems to bring those variables focus in to meet the objective.
Okay.
Okay. Without doing that, I have no control. Okay. Now, to give you an example on objectives, if I ask you, how do I get to City Hall, what would you tell me?
Right down Paris. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good. Except, where am I starting from?
There you yeah. There you go. Yeah, I like that. Yep.
You should have asked
That
me.
should have been the first question.
If I'm in North Bay, Paris Street isn't going to help me a bit. Okay?
You're right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, and that's just a very simple.
But no, it's a prime example of how we operate as a society, right there.
We assume.
Exactly.
And when you're problem solving, and for example, the water issue in a country without water, we assume that it's the lack of water. Well, is that the real issue? Let's get down and boil it down and find out the real problem. And once you do that, and giving back, as we talked a little bit earlier, to society, giving back to the public, what do they really need?
Exactly.
And for example, right now in Sudbury, I would say what most Sudburyans need is a system that finds out what those objectives are.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't see it happening. In particular, I look at our council, I look at our city staff, and we're out there ready to provide solutions, but we haven't defined what the objective is. And unless you do that, you're going to waste all that money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's
and
never
the time,
gonna...
energy, everything else.
Absolutely. So if we can somehow get a cultural change that defines those objectives before we start making solutions, then we'll get somewhere.
Definitely.
Okay. So yeah, it's knowing what you're trying to do before you start doing it.
I think that's huge, Tom, because honestly, like in the industry I'm in, so like I said, I focus on personal development with a mix of a number of different things. But on the back end of that, it's the same question. This is bringing it a little bit more broad. But most people don't even know their why. You know, why they do it. They'll tell you, okay, how I can do this, this, but most people don't know their why. And then they're uninspired by that. They don't get that passion, which equals that energy, right?
That's right.
And that's, I think, a lot of times, a conflicting issue you have. And you just said, you actually that was one thing, I didn't even see it from that lens, but that's the most important thing. It's like, well, yeah, I can go ship this water to Africa, but you know what? You got to go back to the infrastructure and what's in place, and that's the real issue. So that makes a lot of sense, like coming back to it, right? Yeah. You got to get down to the nitty gritty of what's happening, and then go behind the blinders of things. Yeah. That's what I tell people. And this is a little bit off topic, but it's similar to when you're watching the news. And I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but it's something interesting if you want to get thought provoking with some people. I'm like, okay, watch what's on the news. You're watching what's going on in the mainstream, but then always look behind and see what people are suppressing.
Yes. And
you kind of look behind it, so then you get on both sides of the scope, and you can kind of come to your own, bias or whatever it is you're going to think of. And I think that's important, is that most people aren't thinking deep. We're able to think on the surface, but you look at some of these minds that we're associating as crazy, but they turn out to be some of the most brilliant minds there is. They're able to think, and and that's probably the most important skill I've found with people is how it's not how you think, but if you can think on your feet. Yes. And be able to go and you see those people that are witty like yourself, where you're quick, and those are the people you remember, and those are the ones that they poke jabs here and there. And
well, yes, and I can give you another really valid example.
For sure,
is automobile accidents. We'll have a fatality at an intersection, and the next thing you know, the causes come out that the guy made an illegal left-hand turn. He got hit. Is it really because he made the illegal left-hand turn? What caused him to make the illegal left-hand turn? What was the cause behind the cause? And when you go back and start examining those things, it's surprising what you find out sometimes.
It's true.
Did we set up a set of conditions at that intersection that fooled him? And quite often we do.
Yeah.
And we blame the driver, but it's not the driver that's at fault. And it's very easy to say, oh yeah, well, he did this wrong. Hey, clear, the books are closed, and you move on. Let's find out why he made that decision, because no one consciously makes a decision to get in an accident.
Exactly, for sure. Okay.
So He didn't do it consciously. Was he asleep? Was he, like, what caused him to do that? And again, it gets back to this narrowing down those objectives and that purpose.
Getting really focused in.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you, I want to get a little bit philosophical here. Then maybe would you say that, you know, the basis of our society, if we were to get more so, like not clearer focus, but get right down in the nitty gritty of, you know, why we're doing what we're doing, that it would help more so impact, you know, our future, that, you know, we have a lot of conflict in the world. Mm-hmm. Do you think if we were to get deeper into that question, like why we're actually doing it, instead of just putting things on the surface, that we'd maybe be able to create a lasting change?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's one of the major issues. If you see, like, a lot of people were just taking the information and we take it in, we associate, okay, well, that's what the TV told me, you know, and then we take that in, we don't really think about it. And I think that's something in society, if we were really to start thinking, I think that's what's going to make us evolve as a species and kind of push us forward.
Well, and a good topical one right now is anyone watching should ask the question, why, what is the root reason and what is the main objective of the new arena?
Exactly, I like that. It's true.
What is it? Like, I haven't heard it.
It's so true. I'm just thinking it was to lighten up the downtown, to you know.
But it won't do that.
Exactly.
The variables are such that it won't do that.
Exactly.
So what is the purpose of the new arena? And I haven't heard anybody define it. We've had engineering studies, we've had consultant reports, and now we're getting prepared to commit $100 million to a solution when we don't even know what the objective is.
It's true.
That's pretty sad.
That is pretty sad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we could make tremendous gains in this city if we did define what our objectives were before we moved into solutions.
No, exactly.
And I don't know whether this will make any difference to what they're going to decide or not, but certainly we should not be deciding on the basis of no objective.
No, absolutely not, yeah. That's kind of asinine, right, in a way?
Absolutely. They talk about job creation. Well, okay, what jobs are you going to create?
And what about the job loss if it's downtown, or you know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, none of the reasons given, and they're not objectives, they're reasons, okay? But what is the objective? That's, as I said, with my 3 circles.
No, for sure, yeah.
Define that first. What are the variables towards meeting that? Then you can design the controls.
I like that. I'm going to apply that right to my life. Like, I have a different formula for that, but I like your system and the way you think with that. I think that was probably one of the most important aspects you just gave of that interview. For anyone else out there, and this is an entrepreneurial, motivational, peak performance-based type of show, but that's why I wanted to get you in here, because I knew you're a wealth of knowledge that you can offer a great perspective, and that's the thing. What is your objective? You know, most people, I would argue, so my aspect is that I say people are, you know, a lot of people aren't fully clear, but that is, what is their objective? A lot of time they don't know, I'm going to be a doctor to do this. I make the joke, and Tom, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I tell people nowadays that, you know, they're just trying to go for the credential or degree. I tell people you don't have to be a doctor to be credible. Just have them endorse you, like yourself. You know, you just have people, like, they see your work, they like it, and they're like, well, that's good. And then they'll write you a testimonial. And that's the concept. I don't know if we follow the same, but they call it reverse engineering.
Yes.
And I like to utilize that in my life. You take companies like Uber. So Uber sells you time. You know, it's not a taxi service. They're like, I can get you here in 2 minutes. And most people, like, you see a lot of these things are reverse engineering. And I think that's such an important concept to kind of apply, right, for success or anything that you're going to use.
Absolutely.
So I make a joke. I have a PhD in rejection. For my door-to-door selling days, I tell people, like, they're like, do you have a PhD? No, I have it. Yeah, I do. In rejection, you know. Where's my steel-toe boots? Because I had so many doors closed, you know. But to close this interview off, Tom, I think it's super important. If you could leave the audience with one thing, you know, you're mentioning mentors and then obviously the objectives and certain things. Just, I know you just dropped a wealth of knowledge, but if there's anything super important that stuck out in your life that you remembered that you didn't mention in the interview, what would it be? And if you could tell the audience, you can look into the camera on this one.
I guess it would have to be to define where you're going. And that gets back to the objectives. Define where you're going. What is your objective in life? And be absolutely cruel with yourself. And again, I'll give an example. One young lady, I was explaining this to her, and she was in real estate, and I said, well, what's your objective? Oh, she said she wanted to be the salesperson of the month. I said, is that really your objective? Anyhow, after much badgering of her, she finally realized that her objective was to make really good money. That was her objective, but she didn't even realize that. She had set goals in the marketing field, not realizing that the reason for those goals was to make money. So, do you do that by volume? Do you do it by value? How do you do it? These are the variables now that came into her life. She was trying to sell the most number of houses. Hey, look at a few very big sales. You can make the money you want with very little work. Your efficiency just went up dramatically.
Sure.
So know exactly what your objectives are. That's the biggest thing in life. When you're dealing with people who are trying to sell you stuff, and as I mentioned earlier, the situation now with the arenas, what is the objective? Ask your counselors, ask the people who are telling you we need this, well, what is their objective? Because I can tell you, I've asked a lot of them and they don't know. The ones that are very strong proponents for one or the other don't know why they want it, other than, well, we need it. Why do we need it? We went through this with the fire optimization. They went and developed a whole plan. We're going to spend $90 million doing something different. To do what? There was no objective set. They did not know what they were going to do for the people. So if you don't know, why should anybody invest $90 million in your plan? The other, I guess the second part of that is, a plan is only a plan. It's meant to be changed. And as I indicated when we first started, when you're driving down the street and there's a traffic jam ahead, you change your plan. You take a different route. So what? Did it affect anything? No, you know where you were going. But you didn't have to adhere to that plan. You didn't sit there for 2 days waiting for that traffic jam to clear.
Exactly.
You adjusted your plan and you moved forward. Don't stop. Keep moving forward. Adjust your plans, but keep moving forward towards that objective. And I don't know whether that's philosophical or whether that's just a practical approach or what.
No, I think that was right on the money. I think that was a great offer to anybody. That's great advice to anybody. And I truly appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your day to come on the show and talk with a big meathead like me. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
There are no meatheads.
No, definitely no. Exactly, yeah. But it's honestly been a pleasure, Tom. Thank you so much.
Same here. Thank you.
And it'll be interesting, we're calling our bets now to see what happens with the arena. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yes, it will.
For sure, yeah. Give me 1 second.
And thank you very much.
Oh, anytime.